Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have just an amazing show coming right up. Our first guest is Dr. Robyn Stein DeLuca, and she's here today to talk to us about her new book, The Hormone Myth. Dr. Robyn is a health psychologist who specializes in the psychology of women's reproductive health. She has taught for over 15 years in Women's Health Studies Department at Stony Brook University, and she gave a TED Talk titled The Good News About PMS in 2014 that went viral and has over 1 million views. So let's welcome to the show Dr. Robyn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, what a joy it is to have you here, and gosh, what a topic to discuss. You know, I've heard that your, TED Talk has over 1 million views, and it's not surprising because the information on this topic was just astounding.
Well, I think it also helped. The title of the TED Talk is The Good News About PMS. So I think that got a lot of people's attention. So that helped get the word out there, and so many students that day was located at Stony Brook University, that TEDx event, and they came up to me and said, my boyfriend has got to see this. I want him to know that sometimes I'm angry because he did something, and it's not because of my period.
Well, and so I was just enjoying not only your TEDx talk, but of course your book. It's so informative, and I mean, it's interesting because it seems like there's this myth of, obviously you talk about it, of, we're not a bunch of hormone-crazed women running around.
Right. There's this general idea out there that the normal hormonal changes that come with healthy reproductive processes like menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause make women nuts, that when a woman is about to get her period, she's likely to murder you. If there's a pregnant woman, she's going to lose her mind and forget everything and have baby brain. And menopausal women are sad and mopey and or irrational and crazy. And research tells us none of that is true.
Well, it's about time, right? Because I can even remember, and during the time growing up, there was so much discussion in regards to, it's that time of the month, this person's a little imbalanced or what have you. And, and it's kind of, I wonder, where did all this narrative start?
Well, I think it's as early as the ancient Greeks that thought women were very irrational versions of men because they had a uterus, and a uterus could cause all kinds of mental health problems. And since then, we've just seen different versions of it. In the 19th century, if a woman wanted to study advanced calculus, oh no, she couldn't do that because the blood that her brain would need to do that would come from her reproductive organs, and that would, they need to be fed with the right amount of blood, and she's going to be, irrational and crazy. And for women to be mentally healthy, they must only do these domestic family kind of activities. So we've seen it time and time again. And the concept of PMS was established or was named in the 40s and didn't cause a lot of notice, but then some studies were done, some, I must say, very, very poorly studies were done, and people took the idea and ran with it. And instead of describing something that maybe there are some transient physical and emotional symptoms, it became this full-blown mental disorder.
Well, and I kind of resent that as a woman because it shows us as, women being inferior and damaged, and we're so far from that.
Right. I'm sure yourself and women when you think about them, they're generally very high functioning. They do their jobs, they take care of their families, no matter what time of the month or what time of life. So it does create this image that women are less than, less able, less competent, and less rational, and it's been used to keep them out of power in a lot of ways.
So, Dr. Robyn, so I've got to ask, what started you on the path of really finding out about, the hormone myth? What has driven you to not only write this book, but, find out more information in regards to what's going on with this?
Well, I'm a health psychologist, and I was on the faculty in the Women's Studies Department at Stony Brook University for 15 years. And I taught classes to my students about the psychology of women, and I was teaching them about all this research, and their jaws would drop when I would tell them, no, the majority of women don't get PMS. The majority of pregnant women don't lose their minds. And I thought, I really want to bring this message to everyone. Why hasn't this information trickled down to the public? And it just, like you say, it becomes a vexing problem that why should we be limited? So that really motivated me to write the book in a very accessible, conversational way that everybody could have access to this information.
Well, so who really benefits from us keeping this type of a narrative in regards to women and women's health?
Well, the first group of people who benefit are pharmaceutical companies. Because if you can convince women that they have an illness that needs to be treated by taking a drug they've got to take every day of their life, you're making a lot of money. In the 40s and 50s, when doctors started to notice that, women who took hormones in their menopausal years to help with hot flashes, which they do, hormone replacement therapy definitely does help hot flashes. And they said, these patients seem to be healthier than my patients who don't take these drugs. So I think every woman who's at menopausal age, whether she's got disturbing symptoms or not, should take these drugs until the day she dies. And that built up, and hormone replacement therapy became the most commonly prescribed drug in America, which is amazing when you think about it, because only half the population is even eligible to take it. And so that motivated the prize, the keeping that you've got to keep this myth alive if you keep women convinced that they need this drug, and the billions of dollars that were made off of it. So that's certainly one of the first groups of people that benefit. I think second, also anyone who wants to keep women out of very powerful leadership positions. We just saw last year in the presidential election when Hillary Clinton was running, Time magazine ran an article about her. It was a column by an MD who said, isn't it great that Hillary is postmenopausal? She's at the perfect time for a woman to be president because we won't have to worry about all those hormonal crazy times. Well, regardless of your politics, I think most people would agree Hillary Clinton has been really high functioning for most of her life. So it's just nuts that this is brought up. And then, of course, the menstruation accusation heard around the world when Donald Trump didn't like the kinds of questions that Megyn Kelly was asking him and suggested she was bleeding from her wherever. So I think those are two definitely motivated groups in keeping this myth alive. And I think that women, to some degree, have benefited from it because there are a lot of women who, what's the ideal woman? She's someone who is giving and affectionate and emotionally available to her family all the time. And sometimes you want a break. So PMS has become this get-out-of-jail-free card that you can be cranky, you can say, I'm not here for you right now. I need some time to myself. And you get a break. But that excuse comes at a high cost.
Yeah, I think the cost is too high. And, I look back on, because I knew my great-grandmother, and, they weren't talking about hormone replacement. And she was a fabulous person, and her life wasn't diminished in any way, as she was, obviously in menopause. I mean, it just, you look at it and it's just kind of crazy that, there's this discussion going around that if you, have hormones and there's something really wrong with you, and that it's going to make you imbalanced and you can't be a good employee, probably not going to be good at quite a few other things too.
Right. I mean, there's an interesting study that compares women who were sort of World War II era versus their daughters who were baby boomers when they went through menopause. And the women who went through menopause around the World War II era didn't think it was a big deal, didn't talk about it, were really happy when it came because there still wasn't the most reliable birth control around then. So this means no more babies. You could have sex and not worry about babies anymore. But they didn't see it as a big thing, and the baby boomers are so different. Of course, baby boomers talk about everything, that's for sure, but they are looking for medication, looking for treatments. They think getting old and any sign of getting old, which of course menopause inevitably means, is a bad thing and has got to be fought. So it's interesting generationally how that sense has changed.
What kind of studies have you seen that talk pretty much the opposite of what we've all been taught?
As far as what specifically?
As far as when we talk about just, women and PMS and just women in general in regards to that whole discussion with PMS and, because I find the whole portion where, they talk about women not being, kind of as equal because of this whole hormonal change that women go through on a monthly basis. I just find it a very interesting discussion, and I think it needs to be had. It's like, hey, if there's research out there, we need to be talking about it, and and your book is a great resource for that. But whatever you want to share in regards to that, I want to hear it.
Okay, sure. Well, let's start with PMS because that's something everybody's heard about. It's on every magazine cover. There are lots of websites. What you should do to get rid of your PMS. Is your PMS making you shop too much? Just craziness. And the PMS research done, the studies done between about 1950 and late 80s, was very bad research. And what I mean by that is there are some basic methods that need to be used for what you find in a study to be reliable, that you can count on it to actually reflect reality. And one of those things is to have a control group. If you want to compare people with one condition with people who don't have it, you've got to have that group to compare them with. And so many of the studies didn't even have a control group. So if that particular group had some symptoms, it was attributed to PMS. Second, they asked women to describe their symptoms retrospectively, meaning say, how did you feel last month or the month before? And people are really not that good at remembering very specific things like that. So that's not very accurate. And we tend to attribute feelings and emotions and moods to, whatever seems to make sense. And we've gotten so many messages that the week before our periods, we're going to be cranky and moody, that if we are during that time, we're more likely to attribute it to PMS. And then one of the really big problems was over 150 different symptoms were used to diagnose PMS. So anybody could have PMS. Using that many different symptoms, if you only have 5 of them or you only have 10 of them, a woman on the pill could be described as having PMS, which is ridiculous because her hormones remain steady. A man could be described as having PMS based on this super loose definition. So if scientists want to all be talking about the same thing, they have to agree on the specific symptoms that count for that diagnosis, and that was not the case. It changed in the early 90s. Psychologists kind of got their act together and developed a much more stringent diagnosis for PMS. If you were going to be diagnosed with PMS, there were only 11 possible symptoms, and they included marked anxiety, depression, or mood swings, and you had to have 5 of those symptoms. Some of the other symptoms involved some of the physical changes or feeling low energy, things like that. So if you had 5 of those symptoms, but that wasn't all. You had to have them, they had to show up several months in a row. So women were now required to keep a daily log of their symptoms, and that's called prospective research, when you are documenting things as it happens and looking towards the future. So they've got to see that. And then lastly, there's also the caveat that a doctor has to make sure this isn't just another condition being exacerbated. Maybe you have already major depression, and this time of the month is just making that worse. So with all that new criteria, once they started using those really tight definitions, the percentage of women diagnosed with PMS, and it was changed from PMS to PMDD, which refers to premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And so with this new definition, the percentages of women suffering from it ranged from 3 to 8%, and that's based on studies in the last 10 years. 3 to 8% had a disorder that affected their functioning. Everybody else, maybe they had some emotional symptoms, maybe they had some physical symptoms, but they were not going through something that was really debilitating them or making them hurt their relationships or hurt their work situation. So that's an example of how research was very badly done and then done better. And we can see when it was done better, very few women suffer from this.
Well, obviously, if men can fall within the PMS category, there's a major problem there.
There is. I mean, it could have just been, body aches and, feeling tired. And some researchers said, well, you only had to have a few symptoms. Some said they had to be severe, but then other researchers said, no, minor symptoms are important too. So it was just all over the place. So it really made a difference once those methods were tightened up. And with menopause, there's this idea that once women start having their hormone levels go down and they're going to lose their vitality and lose their health, they're just going to be moping and, wandering from room to room. Where have the children gone? And if we look at the latest numbers, especially women who have major depression, a major depressive episode is if you are depressed for at least 2 weeks, you feel sad, despondent, you cry, you're having trouble sleeping, or you're sleeping a lot. The rates of depression actually go down the older women get. The highest rates are for women in their 20s. So menopausal and postmenopausal women are some of the happiest women on the planet. And we know that because there's been a few terrific studies done in the last few years, large-scale studies with, hundreds of subjects where they brought women in and they did blood tests, they measured their hormone levels, and they did very detailed mental health evaluations where they were able to detect if they were having a major depression or not. And they followed them for several years. And both of these studies found hormone level was not related to mood. So we have really good quality. We have really good quality research to support debunking the hormone myth.
Well, and then you talk about this new diagnoses that they finally have come to. I mean, I've never even heard of that. And you think, because everyone has heard about PMS, so you think, gosh, if there's any new studies about it, it would be all over the front page. But again, I can see where, books like yours are so valuable, especially your book, The Hormone Myth, because then it really gives us an idea of what's going on, because the pharmaceutical companies really don't want that kind of message to be shared, because that would kind of take a huge chunk out of their patients if there's actually nothing wrong with women.
Right. I mean, some physicians will prescribe hormone therapy or antidepressants for PMS, and, there may be something entirely different going on. And it's lucrative because once you're on those kinds of medications, you have to see that physician every 3 months. That's what medical protocol says. Yeah. So they're another group that profits from this idea that lots of women get sick at that time of the month.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just so excited because I know we talked a little bit before we actually started with this interview, and I've known, me personally, I've never really felt that PMS affected me, and I've known a lot of different women who they are just down during that time, and some of them I know were kind of really having a tough time, and others were probably kind of taking advantage of it to maybe get off work or not do certain things. It's kind of like how you were talking about, like their kind of day off or what have you. And
right.
So you look at all that, and it's like, gosh, there is a price to pay for that.
Right. I don't want to diminish women who do experience some symptoms, especially physical symptoms. I'm not saying people don't get physical symptoms, and there are the women who get terrible cramps, and I feel for them, and they should find treatment and relief. I want them to engage with the medical community. So I don't want to invalidate what a lot of women go through. And if you're in pain, of course that's going to affect your mood. I mean, that's a reasonable physiological process. But, this idea that this is something that happens to everyone, it just makes me nuts when I see it. And there's a statistic that I see again and again in articles and websites about PMS. They say 85% of women have one symptom of PMS. Now, having one symptom of anything doesn't mean anything. And it makes me nuts when I see that, oh, well, that must mean something. And people interpret that to mean 85% of women have PMS. So that's, for whatever reason, making the rounds in the media, and it really just distorts the whole picture.
Hey, I understand 100%. I mean, I have a friend I grew up with, and, bless her heart, she had the hardest time. She would get sick. She'd pass out. It was just really difficult for her. And there are some people that go through that, and it's awful, and there are other women that might not feel like how you're saying anything. They get that one symptom, and they're like, hey, I'm good here. I'm just going to go around and do, I'm going along business as normal. It doesn't really affect us.
Right. I mean, and certainly for the small percentage of women who really are affected by it, they should get help for sure.
It seems like women now, especially when we get into like the menopause age, just along the women I know and the group of friends that I know, a lot of women are afraid of menopause. They think that, gosh, I now need to go and get, like how we were talking about, the hormone replacement therapy, and, I have to continue doing this because it's like this big fear of crossing into that whole dynamic now.
Right. We see, so few representations of vibrant, exciting postmenopausal women, in movies or in commercials or anywhere that people are represented. You certainly rarely see a love story with someone who is 55 years old. So no wonder women fear getting older because, in the media they get erased. They don't really exist. They're not seen as important. So I completely get that. But there's a great study that looked at the way women feel about menopause, and they interviewed two groups. The first group were women who were premenopausal. They had no symptoms. Their periods were chugging along normally. And they asked them, how do you think menopause is going to feel like? And they could rate it from 0, meaning no big deal at all, to 5, which is the worst thing ever. And the average response was a 4.5. These women were really scared. They thought it was going to be awful. And then they interviewed women who were postmenopausal, who had been through it. They had, gone the 12 months without having a period, not getting hot flashes anymore or any other symptoms. And they asked them, how would you rate this experience now that you've had it on the same scale? And their average rating was a 2.5. It was a bump in the road. It was maybe a little troublesome sometimes, but not a very big deal. And so that's what I'd like younger women to know. They don't need to fear getting older. They don't need to fear menopause as being the end. For so many women, menopause is the beginning of a really exciting time of life. A lot of women, they have the empty nest at that point, and they have the time and energy to focus on what they want to do. So many women see this as a positive time. They don't have to worry about birth control. They don't have to worry about getting pregnant. And the wisdom that they've developed over the years, many women at this age feel confident in expressing their point of view in ways they didn't before. And I think that rattles some people. And they have a problem with it, and they want to say, oh, you're being menopausal. So we need to stop that.
We just need a sign to hold up that says, I'm not menopausal. It's a myth.
Right. It's not my hormones. That's it.
Yeah, not my hormones. Yeah, because, I know with, like, my, different people that I know, there's this huge discussion that goes back and forth sometimes in regards to, like, if you do hormone replacement therapy, should it be bioidentical? Is that better? Or does it matter? And so, it's kind of like one is worse for you than the other. And they never really consider that there's the third option, which is not doing that.
Right. There's other things that you can do to help yourself manage with symptoms that you have. And, I mean, for women who have symptoms that really, really are just too difficult to deal with, there are many physicians who recommend a short course of hormone therapy, maybe 2 years. And that works for a lot of women, and a doctor can help you figure out what's your risk level for some of the side effects that hormones might cause. And there's more and more research coming out now that actually when you're on hormones it also predicts whether there's going to be a risk for things like breast cancer or heart disease. So I think for some women it is a short-term answer, but it's not something the great majority of women need to keep their vitality and their mental functioning.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's talk in regards to maybe some hormone replacement for men, but it's not to the degree that women are expected to do, you know?
Right. I mean, those commercials for men with low T are so funny. This idea that men with low testosterone, the low T guy, he's very slumpy. He looks very sad, and then he gets testosterone. He's dancing, and he's got a nice babe on his arm. There's no very good research to support men taking additional testosterone, and that there are significant risks. So that's a really scary thing for men that the pharmaceutical companies have latched onto that idea that is not backed up by science.
Well, and so other than your book, The Hormone Myth, you know, what are some ways, because there's so much that we're so bombarded by new reports and new findings. What are some ways that we can spot some of this junk science?
Okay, well, the first thing is to have a stance of skepticism when you see the latest study says this or the latest study proves that. No one study proves anything. You need to see several studies with that same result. And so I encourage women to question when research is reported in the news. That's one way. You want to see, okay, who paid for that study? That's always a good red flag to know.
Oh, that is too, yeah.
Right, because, I mean, there's lots of research is paid by government funding, but lots of research is also paid for by pharmaceutical companies. So you want to know where's that money coming from, because it has an effect. I mean, there's lots of studies that verify, you know, when outside entities fund research, that the findings do change. So that's something to look at. I mean, for a lot of women, I suggest that they try to be generous with themselves and other women who might express negative emotions. That we get angry sometimes, and it's not the worst thing in the world. And, you know, if you feel like, oh, yes, you know, I have PMS, I get cranky, I get angry, I encourage people just to allow for the possibility that it might be something else. Give yourself some space and time to think about why you're feeling what you're feeling, what's going on in your life right now. Because once you do that, odds are it is something in your environment that's affecting you. And once you can identify it, you can do something about it. Because that's one of the big downsides of something like PMS is that if you're just going to sweep your emotions under that rug, you never deal with them. You never deal with what the cause is.
Yeah. And I would think that with if you're getting these similar types of responses on, you know, month after month after month, I mean, obviously you want to, you know, talk to your doctor and see what that's all about and really get to the root cause of what that problem is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I don't suggest that women should suffer. I just want to say that, you know, we have different moods all the time. You know, this ideal of the man who is even-keeled, never goes too high, goes too low. That's a fantasy. He doesn't really exist. So to hold ourselves up to that standard is very unrealistic. And lots of things affect our mood. I mean, studies show that the day of the week is more important in determining how you feel than the time of the month. You know, everybody's happy on Friday and everybody's very mopey on Monday.
Yeah, and, you know, I think your book, it's so great because it brings about a discussion we all need to have, because the dialogue does need to change in regards to women and hormones, PMS, all of that. You know, because it's just, I think it's ridiculous to expect that, you know, women are going to be inferior at a job because they may get pregnant, or every month they're going to have, a cycle, so you got to watch out for them, or they're going to hit menopause and not be rational, So it's having this discussion, I think, kind of quells some of these myths that people have had for generations.
Right, and I think one of the big things we can do is to raise our sons and daughters to reject this myth. Give girls a positive feeling about what menstruation is, that it means their bodies are working well. If you get a regular period, that means your body's healthy. If you start missing periods, that means something's going on. And we should also teach our boys that, what happens to women doesn't stop them. And if they've got sisters, say, how would you feel if somebody said your sister can't do a job, can't do something at school because she's got her period when she very clearly can? So I think, something very powerful we can all do, anyone who's a parent, can teach their children, and male and female, because males do want to know about this. For a lot of men, say it was a mystery until they were older and had girlfriends. They didn't know what menstruation was all about. So I think to take it out of the stigmatized, shameful closet and bring a attitude of positivity to it and normalcy could be really helpful in dispelling the myth.
Well, and especially, it brings about a point that we're not a bunch of Stepford wives walking around. We have emotions. Right. We have things that go on that the men have emotions, we have emotions, and maybe it's just about finding better ways to express those.
Exactly. That maybe we need a little more space in our time for self-reflection and understanding, why we're feeling what we feel.
Dr. Robyn, what are some last thoughts you want to leave our listeners?
Well, I want women to feel confident about their bodies and their emotional health. I want them to know what they probably know already, that most women emotionally function at a very high level, no matter the time of the month or their stage of life, and that the future is good, that when they get pregnant and have babies, they're very likely to be the same reasonable thinking person they were. They may be somewhat more emotional, but not to the point that it's going to stop them from doing what they want to be doing or hurt their relationships or their job, and that menopause is this exciting opportunity rather than a sickness to be treated. So I hope women can walk away with a positive view of how their bodies work, how their bodies are related to their minds, and what the future holds for them.
Well, it's easy to see that your TED Talk has over 1 million views with a topic like this. And I highly suggest everyone pick up their own copy, and also a few for your girlfriends or friends in the family, The Hormone Myth. So, Dr. Robyn, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today. Oh, and real quick, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Yes, on DeLucaInsight.com. That's my website, and they can sign up for my monthly newsletter there.
Oh, awesome. And I know you're on all social media, and I'm connected with you, so make sure to get connected with Dr. Robyn, too. Dr. Robyn, thank you for being here with us today.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
We are going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 1, 2, 3 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Do you know that you can become a genius at any age? Do you know that you can change your life and create a brilliant life for yourself? Hi, I am Olympia LaPointe, an award-winning rocket scientist who you more than likely have seen on TED Talks, Impact Theory, and PBS. Check out my latest book, Answers Unleashed, The Science of Unleashing Your Brain's Power. Simply go to answersunleashed.com books and check it out for yourself. You'll find the tools to help you create the life you've always wanted.
The highly acclaimed and newly released book, The Hand Part 2 by Lynn Van Prague Grattan, describes the journey between a psychic medium and a family who lost a son. Messages from Beyond Eternity's Gate is of love and healing. For more information, visit www.lynnvanprague-grattan.com. That's www.lynnvanprague-grattan.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted to be introducing our next guest, Joe Amoia, and he's here today to talk to us about GPS for Love. Now, Joe is a love life transformation specialist, and he's the author of the very popular blog, GPS for Love. He teaches women how to navigate the complex world of men, dating, and relationships, and he has almost 3 million viewers worldwide that enjoy his insights. Joe's a contributor to the Huffington Post and Huffington Post Live, Digital Romance TV, and Your Tango, and he's been featured as a relationship expert on several episodes of Style Network's #1 TV series, Jerseylicious. So let's welcome to the show, Joe.
Hi, Marianne. Thank you so much for the opportunity of being here with you and your audience today.
Hey, what a joy it's to have you here. My goodness, you are like the guru on dating and relationships. And I've been following your YouTube series for some time. You got some pretty amazing information.
Well, thank you. I wish I could say I'm this guru, but I'm just someone who learned a lot of ways that things don't work in our love lives and who was fortunate enough to figure out how to make a wonderful relationship happen. So that's all I'm just really doing is just trying to share what works and what doesn't.
Well, you've got some just right on the money advice. I mean, I've been listening to stuff. I'm like, gosh, that's really good. So how did you get started on this path? I know for our listeners that might be new to your message, they're probably wondering, so how did you even get to this point where, you're giving the advice that you are that's so profound?
It's a great question. And because we are limited on time, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, because I could probably take up about 3 hours sharing the whole story. But long story short, many years ago, I was engaged to be married. And literally 4 weeks, exactly 28 days from walking down the aisle, and it was unhappy. Like, you ever get into one of those times in your life where your gut was just screaming at you? Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of what I was going through at that moment. And I'd been unhappy for a long time. We were actually in therapy. And, if anybody's listening to this, if you're in counseling, you're in therapy before you're married, like, that's a huge red flag. And, and I was telling the therapist saying, you know what, I shouldn't have to work this hard at a relationship. Now, because the therapist was a quote unquote expert, she's like, well, Joe, this is like real life. This is how it is in relationships. Relationships are a lot of work. Now, because she was the expert, I believed her, and I stayed in that relationship and continued to try and make it work, ultimately planning a wedding. And about 4 weeks before, I was sitting at the couch. It was a beautiful August day, looking out the window going, this is a nightmare. I felt like I was in a plane that was spiraling towards the ground and I didn't have a parachute. Like, it was just a matter of time before it crashed and I was going to go up in flames. So I got up off the couch. I went and sat next to the bed where my fiance was sitting. And I just looked her in the eye and I said, will we ever be happy? Now, let me preface this by saying, Marianne, I had asked her that question probably about a dozen times in the last year and a half that we were together trying to make this relationship work. So she always gave me an answer that I was looking for. When somebody tells you what you want to hear, well, that's exactly what she gave me. It's like, yes. It was always yes, but it was always followed with an after or a but. This was like, yes, after she got her master's degree. Yes, after she got a new job. Yes, after we moved in together. Her grandfather was sick. Yes, after he's sick, after he passes away. There was always some kind of an excuse. And so even though my gut was saying this is BS, get out of here, that part of me bought into what she was telling me. And I take full responsibility for that. I stayed for my reasons, which ultimately I learned was because my dad died when I was 15 years old. He left a huge void in my life. And the experience I had with him growing up, that father-son relationship, I was longing to have. And so she was simply my meal ticket for it. Mm-hmm. And so I got involved in the wrong relationship for the wrong reasons. I took full responsibility. And after that, I said, I don't ever want this to happen again. So what was it that I need to learn? What was it I need to do? So I took a lot of what I call mirror time, which is time for self-reflection, to really look at myself, my behavior, that relationship, and why I got to that point. And I knew I had a choice to make because I had an aunt when I was little, her marriage failed, and she spent the rest of her life being a victim and blaming, quote unquote, that bastard.
That doesn't make it too good.
Yeah, and I said I didn't want to be one of these. And she literally wasted her life away in every possible way, financially, emotionally, physically, all because she was so consumed with being a victim and blaming this guy for her life, even though she chose that guy and married that guy. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't want to be that person. So it's like, well, what do I need to learn? What do I need to do differently to create the results? And that put me on this journey. And I was fortunate enough to figure it out. I created a process that I called a checklist for love, which is basically if I'm going to spend the rest of my life with someone, what is it that I need? And there were 3 steps to that process. I didn't write it down. It was something I did mentally in my head, and ultimately came up with a checklist of 7 things. And I promised myself I was never going to ask another woman to marry me if she didn't naturally have all those things that were on my list. Because one of the things that I learned in my journey is we have a habit of focusing on the good stuff and ignoring all the other stuff. And so the things that are not there, that we're not getting, we tend to rationalize, justify, and make excuses for. And that's exactly what I did with my relationship with my ex-fiance. So I was like, you know what? If this person can't give me all these 7 things that I need to be happy, every single one of them, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life with them. And then it was simply a matter of like clothes shopping. You know, when a person goes clothes shopping, there's buying criteria. There needs to be a certain size, a certain fit, a certain style, certain colors, certain patterns, and the price. And it doesn't meet all your buying criteria, you usually put it back on the rack. And that's the way I approach dating, is that, you know what, these are my buying criteria. And if it doesn't have all of my buying criteria, I'm not going to put it on and hope it's going to change, hope it's going to fit, hope I'm going to like it better. I'm going to put it back on the rack because this doesn't work for me.
Well, and I think that's such a rational way of approaching it, because just because the relationship's not a good fit doesn't mean like the other person's evil, you know? Unless it just means that it's not going to work out and you just move on. It's not the end.
You're 100% correct. And that's what I learned is my ex-fiance was a good person. Mm-hmm. She just wasn't good for me.
Oh, yeah.
And so
I get that. I kind of was, close to a situation like that as well. And, was eating a lot of antacids and going, why is my stomach always upset? This is obviously not a fit.
Right. Because that's the universe's way of saying run. But the beautiful thing about us human beings is we have freedom of choice. So we have the ability to make poor choices in our life, which many of us often do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know you don't call yourself the love guru. I'm going to call you that because I feel like your information's so, on target with everything that you do. What are some ways that our listeners, can kind of look at, let's say if you're speaking to our female audience, what are some of the things that they can look at to screen men to see if they are emotionally available even for a relationship? Because a lot of times it seems like women get into these relationships and it just doesn't go anywhere.
Right. Well, you know what? And what I really like to shine some light on is men do the same thing. Why I try to be transparent. I do the same thing. I did the same thing that a lot of women do. You meet someone, there's this great attraction. You go out a date or two. Next thing you know, you're in a relationship. And then you're in the relationship. That person is giving you some of the things that make you happy. You focus on the good stuff and ignore all the red flags. Mm-hmm. So the biggest thing is really getting clear. If you're going to spend the rest of your life with someone, what is it that you're looking for? What kind of relationship do you really want? I did some research a couple of years ago, and I came across this fascinating article. It was actually by a graduate student from the University of Minnesota. And her thesis was basically that 85% of marriages fail. Now, the normal belief is approximately 50%. But she went deeper and she said that approximately 50% of marriages end in end in divorce. But what was really interesting in her studies is that of the remaining 50%, 35% of those individuals admitted if they had to go back and remarry their spouse that they wouldn't.
Ooh.
So they basically stay in unhappy and unfulfilling relationships, and it was always due to some kind of fear. So it may have been fear of being able to make it on their own financially. It may have been fear of finding somebody else and being alone. It may have been fear of if there were children involved, of how the divorce would ultimately affect their children. So there were many different reasons, but it ultimately came down to fear. And I started looking at that and going, you know what? That's pretty sad. Like 85% of people who get married, who walk down the aisle thinking they're going to live happily ever after, wind up being unhappy and unfulfilled in their marriage partner. And I said, I didn't want to be one of those people. And that's one of the things that inspired me on my journey. What do I need to learn? What do I need to do differently? So to get back to your question is to first and foremost get clear. I think the second thing is then to differentiate between what I call the men and the boys. Very often, you hear the bad boy syndrome. This guy, we have great chemistry. There's so much attraction. He's an amazing lover. We have so much in common. And then 3 months, 3 years, 3 decades later, like, I can't stand this guy. Like, he doesn't know how to be a partner. Well, the signs were there in the beginning. It's just very often we choose to ignore them, or we simply miss them because we're so high on chemistry. So I think the biggest thing is being able to differentiate between what I call as a boy, who's simply a guy who's never grown up, who doesn't know how to be a relationship partner, versus a man that's a guy who understands what it's like, who's emotionally available, who's not selfish, who takes responsibility for his life, who knows how to treat a woman, who knows how to be a partner. So if you can just differentiate from the beginning, like in your mind, are you a boy or are you a man? And that's your job, is to screen, is to figure out, not just to go, okay, we're really attracted, we have things in common, and then find out that he's a boy sometime down the road. Because the good news about boys, they're very transparent. And how I came up with that is that I have 3 boys. Mm-hmm. And I was going through something with my son where, like most kids, they want what they want when they want it. And he didn't realize that the choice he was making at that time affected the family. It was like, he wanted what he wanted and he didn't care. And I was talking to a client that day, and I'm like, you know what, you're behaving just like this client was describing her boyfriend. And I'm like, you know what, this guy that she was dating was an emotional boy. It was all about him. He was selfish, he was immature, he was responsible, he was only focused on getting what he could get from her to benefit him. He wasn't really concerned about her and what she needed as a woman. And so that helped me differentiate between the two. So I think if you can start off from the bat, understanding that there are boys and there are men, the majority of games, drama, and BS in dating are going to disappear, because then you just sit back and you say, show me, who are you, a boy or a man?
That's pretty powerful. And I like how, you just kind of cut to the chase. So often we think that there are different roles for men and women, and I guess in some extent there could be, but when you're first identifying, who it is that you're dealing with, the same could be said for women. Are you dating a drama-filled girl, a teenage girl, or an actual, lady?
Oh, you're 100% correct. There's this myth out there, and I understand where it comes from, because what I really do is I study human behavior, and there's these women out there go, it's so easy for men. And I'm like, that's because you're a woman. You've never been a single man. If you find any single guy who's looking for a partner to share his life with, ask him what it's like for him, because you're 100% correct. He has to deal with the needy woman who will take any guy who comes along and pays attention to them, or he has the superficial women who, you have to have the perfect hair, the perfect abs, the perfect car, the perfect job, and you've got to look and say everything perfectly to make them feel better about themselves so they can feel important, to validate themselves. Mm-hmm. And so it's just as difficult for guys. You're 100% correct.
I know you get thousands of people that come to you for relationship advice and just being able to, find the love that they're looking for in their life. What is like the number one reason people come to you?
Well, the biggest reason the people who are attracted to me and GPS, the GPS for Love message, is that they're at that point in their life where it's like, I don't want another one of those, what I call toilet bowl relationships. And those are the ones that make you feel like crap. And it's like, I'm done with that. I don't want another relationship where I'm going to invest my time, energy on a guy who's going to misrepresent himself, that, is going to tell me he wants to be in a relationship and then he's going to disappear. Or then he's going to say, he's not sure if he wants to be. Like, they want that guy who says, you know what, I'm looking for an amazing woman. I have no problem committing to her. I will commit to that woman when I feel in my heart that it's right. Are you her? That's what most women are looking for. Those are the people who are attracted to GPS for love. And so what I do is try to help them learn how to be that woman, because there's this myth that guys can't commit, that don't want to commit, or are looking to get laid every minute of every day. And that's not true. Now, don't get me wrong. I love sex just as much as the next guy. But that's not the only ingredient in a relationship. How many people have had relationships with a guy where you've had an amazing sex life, but the rest of the relationship was horrible? And that's why I just try to shine on the light on the truth. Like, this is how it works. And if you go into those relationships where you have amazing chemistry and amazing sex life, that's great, but it'll never turn into that happy, fulfilling relationship. You'll never be in the 15%. So what I try and say is that let's learn how to get into 15% so you can have an amazing sex life and an amazing relationship. Because it really doesn't have to be that difficult. It's just we're not taught how to do it. And as a result, because we're driven, emotional creatures who are driven by our emotions, we very often make poor choices and decisions in our love life.
Well, and it's nice to be able to have somebody like you as a coach that people can connect with and say, okay, I feel like I'm off balance here, or something's not quite fitting, or I'm not really even sure that this is where I need to be. And they can, work with you on really seeing if this is the relationship they should be spending their time with or not. And I love your analogy that you start off with of the toilet bowl, which it kind of makes things very clear. I mean, is this a waste of your time, or is this something to really invest in?
Yeah. My philosophy is, look, if you want to settle and you want to be in the 85%, that's okay. It's your journey. I respect your right to live life the way you want to live it. But if you choose to settle, then I believe you give up the right to complain. Mm-hmm. Like, if you say, you know what, I'm going to stay with this guy and he's not giving me everything I need to have the relationship I desire, well, then I believe that you have no right to complain about him because you're choosing to stay there.
Yeah. And do you ever get people who are in those relationships that maybe just didn't have the information to make good choices, and they come to you later on and they're like, well, what can I do at this point? Is it time for me to leave, or do I stay? What do I do?
Do I ever? How about, is there ever an hour that goes by? and that's why I do this, is because the reality is we've never been taught about this thing called love. We've never been taught what it takes to create a happy, fulfilling, long-lasting relationship. Most of the people who are attracted to GPS for love are very smart, intelligent, professional women, and they succeed in their professional life. But when it comes to their relationships, there's reasons why they struggle. And I'm not here to say that they're wrong. It's just they were never taught how to succeed. They went to school for their business. They took training. But when it came to their relationships and their intimate life, they were never taught. And that's really what I try and do, is let's just shine some light on this is how it works. It's not rocket science. When you just understand human behavior and what it takes to create a great relationship, no different than creating a great restaurant. The restaurants that succeed tend to do things in common. Well, people who have successful relationships, i.e. the people who are in the 15%, tend to have some things in common. So if we understand what those things are and we use them to our advantage, it makes it much easier to create a relationship, a healthy relationship.
So what are, and I don't want you to give it all away here, but what are a couple of things that we should be, the top relationships that are successful, what are a couple of things that they have that are in common that people really need to, look for in the relationships that they're wanting to cultivate?
Right. Well, I like to use analogies because I'm a big believer in making things simple. You get all these people who try to get out there and try and sound all intelligent, and people go, what the hell did he just say? So I like to, to make it really simple for people to understand, because I'm one of those people. Like, don't impress me. Talk to me in a way that I can understand what you're saying so I can use this information to make better results in my life. Mm-hmm. So very often what happens in a relationship, because a relationship is like a business partnership, is that you need two people who are on the same page, who are able to complement each other and who can work together. And so very often a person, male and female both do this, go into a relationship expecting the other person to make them happy. And so right off the bat, they're going into the relationship for the wrong reason. And they have some unresolved emotional stuff that they've never looked at, they've never addressed, or they've never worked on. So they come into the relationship with, quote, if you want to call it, baggage. And as a result, they start off on the wrong foot. To create a great relationship, you have to first and foremost be a healthy relationship partner. You have to be emotionally available. You have to be rid of your baggage. You have to be able to trust the partner. You have to be able to be willing to be vulnerable to the right person for the right reasons. And it takes two people to do that. That's one of the reasons why 85% of marriages fail, because you have two people who both have to come in at the same level and start from there.
Well, and I think, if I get this correct or not, if not, just correct me. But I mean, so we can only attract that which we are. So if we're not working on our stuff and we come into a relationship with a lot of baggage, chances are that we've also attracted somebody that has the same or equal or more, as far as baggage is concerned, because someone who has their act together is not going to fall for that.
Yeah. That's one of the myths that, where these guys can't commit. It's not that we can't commit, is we take this stuff seriously. If we're going to spend the rest of our life with one woman and one woman only, there's got to be something really special about that woman. We have to know in our DNA that our lives are better and we're going to be happier with that person in it. If we don't feel that, if we don't know that, we're not going to commit to a woman, no matter what she looks like. And so when you were 100% correct again, when a person is being that partner, when the right, and the key word here is right guy comes along, he's going to recognize it. He's going to say, you know what, this woman is different. Okay, there's something special about this woman. The way she shows up in my life, the way she treats me, the way she's there for me makes me realize that my life is better and I'm happier with her in it. And if I were to let her go, it'd be a huge mistake. When you get a guy to realize that guy has no problem, when he's emotionally available, to commit to that woman.
So what if someone shows up in the relationship and they have a lot of fear of getting hurt? How do you help people through that situation?
Well, first we deal with the fear of getting hurt, because the fear of getting hurt is really something called uncertainty. It's I'm going this and it has the possibility of going wrong, because we usually base that on the past. And look, there's no guarantees that my wife isn't going to come in later today and serve me divorce papers. Now, would I bet everything I owned against it, knowing who she is and knowing what kind of relationship we have? Absolutely. But there are no 100% guarantees. When we got engaged, when I got engaged to my wife, after the next day we were lounging by the pool, and she's, and it was one of those what I call female moments where she looked at me and said, promise me you'll never leave me. Now, as you know, I'm a straight shooter. So I looked her dead in the eye. I said, I can't promise you that. And you should see that there was like a look of shocked terror on her face. Like, you just gave me a ring and asked me to marry you, and you can't promise me that you're never going to leave me. So I saw that look of sheer terror, and I said, look, let me explain. If you continue to be the woman that I've known and I've fallen in love with and that I love, I ain't going anywhere. I said, but if you walk in 10 years from now and you say, you know what, I decided to go screw the mailman because that's just what I felt like doing, then why would I want to stay with you? Like, I don't want to be with someone who doesn't love me, respect me, and honor me and show up in my life the way I want them to show up.
Well, and so that really kind of just talks about having respect for a relationship, and there's having some of those key components going forward, is kind of more important than, I think, really the certainty if the relationship's going to go forward. Because, I mean, it's kind of a course if you know that you love, honor, and respect your spouse, and you're getting that back.
Yeah. And, it's kind of what we were saying earlier, getting back to the beginning of your question, is that uncertainty, that fear. I always say you've got to love courageously. Part of what makes a great relationship so great is the possibility that it could end. I think what causes me to show up and be the best husband and best father that I can be is knowing that if I don't, my wife can say, I'm out of here. Mm-hmm. So knowing that causes me as a man to make sure that I don't give her any juice, any reason to do that. And I know that she feels the same way. So, but that's what makes it so scary. But I think that's also what makes it so wonderful, is knowing that you have a person who says, you know what, I could go elsewhere, but I choose to be with you. But if a person that I'm working with has that fear, we simply jump in and we deal with it. And we get them to the point where they're comfortable enough and confident enough to know how to recognize a guy who probably isn't going to hurt them.
Well, I think that's kind of, from what I understand, women want security to some major extent. They want to feel like they're secure in relationship and who it is that they're dating. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think that that's something that it can be like one of the number one things that women search for, even if they've dealt with all their baggage and they are in a healthy place. Do you see that, or are you getting different things from your clients?
Well, yes, that kind of goes into that certainty. That security is the certainty that to know that this man's going to be here, he's going to love me, he's never going to leave me. So yes, but actually the number one thing that research shown that women look for is they want to feel safe. For a woman to commit the rest of her life to a man, she needs to feel safe that this man is going to be there, he's going to protect her, and he's going to take care of her, and he's going to have her back. And then after that is that security, is that, you know what, that I'm secure in this relationship. And what leads a woman to feel secure is knowing that she's safe.
How about for men? What's the number one thing for them?
Trust. Man needs to know that he can trust a woman enough to allow him to be himself.
It's interesting because there's, like with trust, and I hear a lot about respect as well. That's supposedly another big piece. Is that kind of hand in hand, or does it depend on the person?
Well, think of it like a bicycle wheel. At the hub is the vital things. And what I call at the hub is love, because we all want to feel love. And all these things that we're talking about are just spokes. Some spokes are a little bigger than others. But in order to have that relationship that we're really looking for, we need all the vital things. That's why in a checklist for love, these are the things that help you identify what's really important. These are things that will help you identify that when you're going to feel safe, when you're going to feel secure, when you're going to feel valued, when you're going to feel appreciated, when you're going to feel compatible. All the things that a person needs to be fulfilled in a relationship, a healthy relationship.
Okay, that makes sense. And I like that analogy because I think it's easy for people to look at it. It's like, okay, like love's the glue, and then we've got all these other components that make for a healthy relationship. Now, let's say our needs are not being met, both men and women. When is the right time to do an assessment and say, you know what, this isn't working out, maybe it's time to walk away?
It gets to the point. I think the right time is the second you realize that this person can't give you everything you need to have the relationship you desire in your heart. And so for some people, you can figure that out on the first date. Mm-hmm. Some people, you need to date someone a few times to figure that out. Sometimes it's a couple of months. But if you're really on your game and you're the partner you need to be, and you're observing someone, it will take you no longer than a few months to figure out, is this the person that I really want to spend the rest of my life with? If you're really upfront and honest with yourself. And that's one of the inherent challenges, because we tend to BS ourselves, usually because we're afraid. Because if I admit that this isn't the person, then I'm going to have to be alone. Then I'm going to have to start over again. Then I may be single. I may not find somebody better. So maybe I should just settle.
Well, it's interesting. When you first start dating somebody, and I just look back in my dating life, it's always been so important for me to figure out if we even have the same values and the same goals. Otherwise, there's just no point. They could be the nicest person in the world, but if their goal is to, just make friends and date and stay single, well, it might not be the same as the goals that I have.
Yeah, and that it's simply having a conversation with someone, sitting back. This is the way I always envision it. Like you're sitting at a restaurant, in a booth, and you're both just sitting back with your arm over, saying, "Tell me about yourself. What are you looking for? Where do you want to go?" Because at this point in the journey, if a man doesn't know who he is, what he wants, and where he wants to go, those are huge red flags.
Then you're dating a boy, then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to know, okay, this is who I am. This is what I'm looking for. What are you looking for? And am I what you're looking for? And are you what I'm looking for? And if not, let's just have a good time and then part our separate ways because I don't want to waste your time and I don't think you want to waste mine. That's being adult. But very few people can do that, usually because of their emotions, especially if they're sitting across from that person and there's this intense chemistry, which I can't stand that word because it creates so much confusion for people.
Well, why don't you clear that up for us? Because I know a lot of people have some misconceptions in regards to chemistry.
Right. So there's something, and if I had hair, I'd pull it out every time I hear this word. Like, Joe.
Maybe that's why you don't have hair.
Exactly. It's just saying, you know what, Joe, I got to have chemistry. And so very often I go, okay, well, what is chemistry? And people don't know what it is. It's like, well, it's, and then, and a feeling and I know it when I know it. I'm like, can you be a little bit? And then I always say, okay, let's be clear. Have you ever felt that amazing chemistry that you described with someone ever before? And they're like, yeah, of course. I said, did that lead to the relationship that you wanted? No. Okay. So is it really about the chemistry? And you see, that's when the light bulb goes on. Well, maybe it's not. Now, for those listening, before you start sending me email, I'm not saying that chemistry is important. What I'm saying is most of us don't understand what it really is and confuse it for what we think it should be. Because usually chemistry for most people, when they refer to chemistry, is I want to feel a physical attraction and an emotional connection with someone. So when this guy is up and he's making me laugh and we have things in common and he's really attractive, I feel that chemistry. But that's why, though, if you focus just on those two things, that chemistry doesn't last to the relationship you want. There's a third ingredient that most people overlook, and that's compatibility. Is that, yes, I want that physical attraction, that emotional connection. Those things are vital. But we also need to figure out, are we compatible partners for this thing called life?
Yeah, because if you get married for life, if you're looking, if that's the goal, then you want to make sure when you're in your 80s that you are still able to communicate and get along with one another. It's a fun journey, not a miserable ride.
And this is one of the biggest myths. I call it the Disney myth, where wait for your prince to complete you and you can live happily ever after. But what they don't tell you, after you get married, there's this thing called life. And life is going to throw SHIT at you. And if you don't have the right partner by your side, that stuff that life throws at you is going to cause you to grow apart. Now, if you have the right partner by your side, it will actually cause you to grow together as individuals and as a couple. And those are the relationships that last into their 80s.
Well, maybe that's why all the Disney movies end right after they get married. Yeah, it's like the end. We're done.
Yeah. They forgot about the sequel.
Yeah, they don't show her, throwing dishes at him or something. Yeah. So, well, Joe, I really appreciate your time. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our time today. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn a little bit more about the work that you do?
Sure. So there's a bunch of places. The first place is we have a website, which is gpsforlove.com. We've just created recently a Facebook community because my goal, my intention is to create a movement of women and men. I don't only specifically work towards men. It's women as well because there are men who are looking for that great relationship. Mm-hmm. And so we've got a GPS for Love Facebook page. So if you just go to Facebook, put in GPS for Love, you'll find our page. And I start going a little more in depth in some of our videos instead of, the superficial dating tips and we go really, the stuff we're talking about here, we go a little deeper and we're able to interact and build a community. We also have the YouTube channel for those people who like to watch videos. So we have a bunch of different platforms for people to connect with us in a way that feels best and most organic for them.
Oh, well, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you again, Marianne. It was an honor and privilege to be with you and your audience, and I greatly thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, and remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.